Hi and hello. I hope all is well with you wherever you are in the world today, and welcome. Today I am going to be talking and analyzing The Walking Dead, specifically season 6 and 7. In order for me to get that going, I kind of want to talk just a little bit about anarchism because as I was watching the show, it became obvious to me that they're living in a post civilized world in the apocalypse where there are no governments, there is no authority, there is no law. It's colloquially understood as anarchy, right? It's anarchy in the streets, every man for themselves. And so I was like, oh, okay, so this is how people have to kind of get along, right? And Rick is symbolically a man of law. He was a sheriff in the before times, during civilized times. And so as you watch his character go through every trial of this story, he's constantly seemingly battling this anarchy, but having the spirit of lawfulness and orderliness through it all, trying to stay connected to that part of his humanity. And it's worth noting that Rick is the hero of the story. We want him to win. We want him to succeed. He's a good guy. And so with that being said, he eventually finds his way to Alexandria in season 6, who is led by a congresswoman, a stateswoman, a true politician, a leader of leaders. And she has a vision and has this sort of like way of being from the before times, because she was a congresswoman. So the echoes of that past can live again through her and the society of Alexandria. But she has a bigger idea, not just for Alexandria, but for the world at large. She would like to bring back civilization. We as people can thrive again. But there's this problem. At that time, when Rick was introduced to Alexandria, he had just spent a long time out in the wilderness and basically became like a caveman, right? So he was brutal. He was basically kind of like a Neanderthal, a savage. He was just like barely getting by, totally brutal, extremely violent, doing anything it took to survive. He had all but lost his humanity. And so he slowly starts to come back into the fray. He starts to find his humanity again in the peacefulness that Alexandria offers with its security and its walls and its people. But that's the thing. The woman who is in charge of Alexandria recognizes that if this vision that she has for the future is going to work, it has to work with reality. It has to work with the fact that outside of the walls of Alexandria, it's anarchy. So how are you going to get people to go along with a program when they're all savages and they're living in a prehistoric time? They're all primal in their way of being. And so this is a true problem. Unfortunately, the leader of Alexandria dies, and Rick is somewhat put in charge, which is fine because he's the hero of the story, and as I said before, has it in himself to kind of be a moral, civilized figure. So people look to him, and he has a certain authority to him. But he's a democratic leader. More or less. For the most part, he takes into everybody's opinion and just sort of plays off of them and weighs the decisions out, and they go along with him. People trust him. They like him. They want him to thrive. They believe that by going along with him, they too can thrive, and they trust him entirely with their lives. Okay, so that kind of talks about where we were when we met the town of Alexandria and where the heroes of the story are in Alexandria. Rick kind of represents something closer to the present era of civilization. But let's go now to Hilltop Colony, which was this like place where they met a guy named Jesus, and there's a biblical guy right there, right? I just want you to put a pin in that for a minute because it will make sense here soon. They meet a guy named Jesus, and he brings them to Hilltop Colony. Now, right away, when you see Hilltop Colony, at the top of the hill is this magnificent museum. It's a beautiful building. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that is so radical. I was telling my girlfriend, that's so cool. Look at that. It's Second Empire architecture. And I know from my research of Napoleon Bonaparte and the French Revolution that Second Empire speaks not to the First French Empire, but to the Second French Empire led by Napoleon III. So that style of architecture is called Napoleon III or Second Empire. Anyways, it looks very similar in many ways to Victorian architecture, except instead of the steeples that like come to a point at the top and the spires or whatever you want to call them, Second Empire has like more 90-degree angles and flat tops. So it looks similar in a lot of ways, but also has its own unique look. And when you see one, you can point it out quite easily. So when I saw that, I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. It's like somebody must be a fan of the French Revolution. I don't know. So I'm just watching the show. And when they bring the characters into the museum itself, all along the walls were all these revolutionary heroes like George Washington. And when the leader of Hilltop Colony is laying in bed with a stab wound and haggling with Maggie, on the wall behind him, I see a painting of Napoleon Bonaparte at his coronation, where he's wearing the laurel wreath crown and he's about to place the crown on Empress Josephine's head in front of the Pope. Napoleon Bonaparte was a revolutionary figure as well, you know, and when he was doing that during his coronation, he crowned himself as opposed to the Pope crowning him, because the revolution had been swept across Europe at the time and the aristocracy was over. The monarchs are gone. And Napoleon was a different kind of a leader. And in many ways, he was like a monarch, an emperor, by the way. It's just that he was considered the emperor of the French, the people, as opposed to a monarch, which would be like, you know, the divine right of kings, ushered in by God. So this was all like revolution in the air, thanks to, some people say, like the Enlightenment and this other way of thinking and stuff like that. And so these things matter in the storyline of The Walking Dead so far. At least that's what I'm noticing. And then on the other side of town, there's this place called the Kingdom, which is like this other vestige of the past, right? It's the kingdom led by King Ezekiel, another biblical name. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe I almost forgot to mention that Alexandria also has their own biblical guy named Gabriel, who's a priest. Anyways, he's not that important. So for at least not for this analysis, but I just wanted to mention that there's like all this biblical stuff happening in the story. Okay, so anyways, to the kingdom, okay? You're introduced to King Ezekiel, and Carol is kind of mocking him and his kingdom because she knows what it's like out there in Anarchy Land. She knows how brutal and violent it could be and how savage you have to be if you're gonna survive. And she's like, you're all make-believing. This is like playtime over here. You're a joke. Look at you. You're walking around with a tiger and you're talking all funny sounding, you know, like Shakespearean sounding and so on and so forth. And he confesses, in fact. He actually says, you know what, you're right. I am the King Ezekiel, and I do have a silly way of being and talking, and I do have a tiger, but there's a reason why all this happened, you know, like, before, I was just a regular dude. I wasn't particularly special. I like to do stage acting in a theater to do plays and stuff. And so I know Shakespearean plays really, really well. And I also had a job at the zoo. So after all this happened, I went to the zoo, and this tiger who knew me already kind of just like went with me, and we hang out together because he knows me and trusts me. So when people started seeing me walk around with a tiger, they started to be like, oh my gosh, this is a crazy miracle. Like, this guy has tamed a tiger. He must be some kind of a hero or something. And they started mythologizing him in a certain sense. And instead of arguing with it, he just went with it. And because he's a noble guy, he wasn't gonna be a dictator and like rule people with an iron fist. He was just like, people wanted me to be their king, and so I became their king, and to the best of my ability, I try to be the best king I can. I care about these people. I sincerely do, and I want them to live happy lives. And if you take a look around, I can see that we are managing to live happy lives here somehow, some way. So you have the kingdom, which is like speaking to like this old way of being with monarchs, and then you have the hilltop society with Jesus there, and he's kind of, that society kind of speaks to the revolution and the wind. It's blowing in the wind, something is on the horizon, something's coming just over the hill, a sort of revolution. But what kind of revolution? And then you have Alexandria, which is its own society, which is closer to more like present time of being. And so I thought, okay, so the story is ushering in a kind of civilization. They're finally finding their way out of this anarchy that they're in, but how do they get to where they're going? Lastly, I want to talk about, not lastly, I beg your pardon. We almost missed, I can't believe I almost forgot these people, the scavengers, the garbage people. They live in garbage. And I thought it was interesting that they live in garbage, because I actually, with them, I had the hardest time figuring out the metaphor of what they represent in a civilized sense. And the best thing I could think of is they're more or less just like sheeple. I know I'm not meaning to be like people are like sheep, but literally I think that's what they're supposed to be. Not like they don't care one way or another about anything. They don't want to make a mark in the world. They don't care about the future. They don't care about the past. Mostly they just care about right here, right now. And they're not trying to like make an impact in any meaningful way, one way or another. They live in trash, okay? So they're like nothing, okay? That's the best way to imagine them. I don't know if they would really be sad if anybody died. I don't know if they are sad if they kill people or don't kill people. They're just sort of just like malleable, you know? So I was like, okay, so they're neither here nor there. Let's just ignore them for the most part. And they seem to serve the purpose in the story of just like adding numbers to the group, because they're all going to go to war eventually. And now we're going to talk about the saviors. These are the bad guys. These are the bad guys in the story. And I thought it was fascinating that they're called the saviors, because every time you see them, they're not saving anybody. It seems more like they're pillaging and brutalizing and hurting people. So why would they call themselves the saviors? They're ruthless. And they're flexing their power all over the place. If you say anything against them, even a little bit, you will die. They will kill you. And so I just thought it was interesting that they're called the saviors, and I was trying to figure this out. And they're led by a guy named Negan, and everybody calls themselves Negan. In fact, they have to throw away their birth names and adopt the name Negan. Who are you? My name is Mike. Well, who are you? Say again, who are you? And if you don't say your name, you're going to die. So your name? Oh, I'm not Mike anymore. My name is Negan. I'm Negan. He's Negan. She's Negan. We're all Negan. And if you don't say that, and if you don't adopt the idea, then you will be killed. Okay, so it's like a really brutal sort of culture they've got going on there. But as Negan walks around, people kneel to him. They bow before him. He has multiple wives, and he's just taking advantage of his power everywhere he goes. But people are seemingly going for it. Why are they going for it? Now we need to talk about this other piece of art that really ties it all in together. I want to talk about Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. And in that book is this parable, a story within the story called The Grand Inquisitor. I found that book to be really boring. It took me a long time to actually get through that book, but of the book, this story is the most interesting. It's so weird. Like, this tiny little piece of the book is actually really interesting. I've researched it again and again, and there's a lot of really fascinating takeaways. So in the story of the Grand Inquisitor, Jesus Christ comes back from the dead during the time of the Spanish Inquisition, which was a horrible time in human history, as you can imagine and perhaps may have heard, because people were being burned at the stake for being heretics. Very much similarly to The Walking Dead and Negan. If Negan was, if I'm tying all this together, Negan would be like the Grand Inquisitor, and the saviors would be like the Catholic Church. And if you don't go with the program, you'll be burned at the stake as a heretic. So go along to get along, right? Now, in the story of the Grand Inquisitor, Jesus is brought back from the dead. He's walking around and he's performing miracles with people, bringing them back from the dead, and everybody's happy. And civilization is like, all right, yay, Jesus is here. He's going to help us. But the Grand Inquisitor sees this and he has Jesus arrested and sent to prison. It's in that prison cell where the Grand Inquisitor starts berating Jesus. And Jesus, through the whole course of the story, never says a single word. But the Grand Inquisitor goes on this long speech. And he starts telling Jesus, how dare you come back and mess with us and meddle in our affairs? Do you have any idea how difficult it was to fix all that you had broken in the civilized world? What with your freedom and giving people freedom? How could you have given people freedom and then just go away and let people be free? They don't know how to be free. They don't know how to do good and be free at the same time. If they're going to be free, they're going to choose to do the wrong thing. They're never going to be able to make it into the kingdom of heaven as long as they know that they're free and can do bad. They're going to fall back into their primal ways. They're not going to be able to stay in to the civilized fold. So people like me, the Grand Inquisitor, have to give them something to believe in. Law, order, government. There needs to be punishments for people. And who's to decide what punishment should go to who and how and what? We decide, and we take on the guilt of all that. The nobodies out there, the garbage people, the scavengers, they don't have to worry about anything at all because we are in control of it. We will take on the pain of the guilt of all the people that we've hurt, and normal people can just ignore it all because it's not their fault that this happened. It's our fault that this happened. We're the ones who are issuing the edicts and making the laws and so on and so forth. And they're going to go along with it because by going along with it, they're going to get security and bread and they're going to be able to survive and live, and they don't have to worry about right or wrong. They just have to follow the rules. And that's all there is to it. In fact, the guy goes into explaining how in order to build this civilization, people need three things: authority, mystery, miracle. And he also mentions that these are the three things that Satan himself had tempted Jesus with in the Garden of Gethsemane before he was crucified on the cross. But Jesus denied all those things of Satan. He told them no, because Jesus is a hero. He wasn't going to take the bait. The Grand Inquisitor is like, how could you have done that? But thanks to Satan, he made the template for how to do it. And so we took on the ways of Satan. We're in league with Satan. Admittedly, we're bad people. But it's the only way. It's the only way we can do it. And so I think that Negan is like the Grand Inquisitor. And he's just like, hey, you know what? People like me need to be here, so that people like you, the garbage people, have a sense of security. There really is no security out there. That's sort of the whole point of this anarchy way of being, this post-civilized world. Security isn't real. Nothing is, I shouldn't say security isn't real. Security is real. It's more or less a sense, though. You know what I mean? You don't really truly know how safe you are. They're never going to be like 100% safe, because we're not immortal. We're mortal. There's something, somewhere, somehow, some way, something could kill us. And so there really truly isn't any true security in a whole sense. There's always a variable of danger and risk in everything that we do. And so we buy into these systems because it gives a sense of security, is basically what the guy is explaining. But how far are you willing to go with the trade-off? And this is what season 6 and 7 speaks to, because the saviors come in and they rule over all these colonies through fear and intimidation. And they've killed countless people, terrorized them. If they don't go along with the program, they're going to be killed. So they are forced to go along with the program. And they're basically slaves. And they say as much. Negan says, everything that is yours is mine. I want half of your stuff. And I say how much half is. So if I want to take everything and call it half, that's what it's going to be, because I'm in charge and you're going to go with it. So I get to define the terms since I'm in charge, and you have to go with it or you will die. And so Rick and Michonne are arguing about, or not arguing, discussing in a certain sense, raucously, about how are we going to move forward and live, because we're not really, we're living, but we're not living. You know what I mean? We're not free to decide the kind of people that we want to be. We're not going to get to choose our destiny so long as Negan is in control, so we have to fight against him. And so this is where the story is going. In many respects, the argument that the Grand Inquisitor is making to Jesus has some legitimate validity to it. It's a valid point. And in the other hand, Jesus is freedom. He's the savior. He's the true savior. These guys are the false saviors. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that how do you wrestle with this idea of absolute freedom in a civilized world, knowing that there is a cost and benefits analysis going on with every single thing that you do, and how much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice for a sense of security? Every single person is going to have a different measurement of these things. And so how do we get along? It's a tricky one, and this is where the idea of like the philosophical thinkers of anarchism put forward their ideas that, authority is not legitimate. It is something that has been completely invented by people with power. And so the people with power have attempted to explain it in a way where those who might be interested could curiously learn from it, like something like Robespierre and his social contract. But then there's other people who have argued against that. What kind of contract? I haven't signed any social contract. And even if there was such a thing as a social contract, nobody signed it. I didn't sign a contract. So where's this contract that supposedly I have signed that exists out there? That's and if there is a contract, the only people who have to adhere to it are the people who signed it in any legal sense. So when you're talking about legality, where does legal? Anyways, the point is that so much of society is invented, which speaks to what King Ezekiel was talking about. People just sort of made it up, and I went along with it. And he's a good guy, by the way. I want to mention that. King Ezekiel is a good guy. He cares about the people. He wants them to thrive and succeed. And so it's just this interesting sort of dynamic that's at play right now in the storyline as season 7 unfolds, because they're building an army to fight tyranny, which spoke to the revolution I was talking about from the Hilltop Colony. Jesus is the leader of the Hilltop. Rick is the leader of Alexandria. King Ezekiel is the leader of the kingdom. And I think her name is Jadis, is the leader of the Scavengers, which you can just ignore them because they're not really interesting people. They're not vying for power in any meaningful way. So they don't care either way. They're just going to go with the flow. Anyways, that they represent the overall whole of people, by the way, in society. when these factions do eventually build civilization, people like the scavengers will take from that civilization and live off of it, and never really make an impact in any meaningful way, one way or another. It's almost a way of looking at it, I think, would be like civilization is a gift for the garbage people. That's horrible, right? It sounds terrible. But it's like, this is the fantasy of any leader who's in charge of civilization. I'm going to bring civilization to the savages. I'm going to make them good by following along with my way of being. And the contradiction, the sad fact of the matter is that you're really not saying, the whole idea of this is just fantasy. It truly is anarchy in the streets, anarchy in the UK or whatever you want to call it, there really is no true authority, and the authority that is in existence out there is all just made up. These are just people. One minute they were out in the wilderness, barely surviving, and the next minute they're in charge of an army fighting for freedom. And now they're in charge of your lives, making rules and laws that people go along with because people want to believe in them. And that was what King Ezekiel was sort of talking about. And contradictory, interestingly, what the Grand Inquisitor was speaking to Jesus, which is what I was saying, is like there is this interesting conundrum happening in the storyline. Gosh, I have gone on for 26 minutes at this point, and I don't know if I did a really good job explaining this. So I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers to the civilization questions. I don't have the answers here. I'm just seeing this is what is seemingly at play in these 2 seasons of the show. And I'm fascinated in seeing where it goes because I haven't finished season 7 yet. I think that they could kill Negan, or they might let him go. At the end of the Grand Inquisitor, Jesus, who never says a single word the entire time as he's taking a verbal beatdown from the Grand Inquisitor, reaches across the jail cell and kisses the Grand Inquisitor. And perplexed, the Grand Inquisitor stands up, almost as if to start crying, and surrenders himself to the moment, turns his back on Jesus, and walks out of the cell, leaving the door open. This suggests to me that the world is big enough for the two of them to exist in together. And that, if there is an answer at all, and this is completely off the cuff, that is the answer. We have to find a way to work together in this mixed up, crazy world. People like the Grand Inquisitor and people like Jesus. Civilization, orderliness, tyranny, and freedom. It's got to work somehow, some way. We can make it happen somehow, some way. That, I think, is the point of the Grand Inquisitor, and I think the point of The Walking Dead season 6 and 7. So thank you very much for listening to me this whole time. Bye for now. Take care.